Ladies and gentlemen, today we have Aidan Webster. He is my nephew. He is currently residing in Galveston, Texas, to attain his PhD in some form of oceanography, microbial something. What are those things called?
Foraminifera. I'm using lots of different proxies in order to understand climate in the Caribbean and West Florida Shelf in order to better predict hurricane activity. That's what I'm doing. The PhD, it's just, ocean stuff. I like the ocean.
I like the ocean, and I hope it's still there due to the efforts through smart people like you.
Luckily, it will be there in more and more amounts if you live near the coast with every passing year.
Everyone has new coastal beachfront property.
Yeah.
He made it happen. He had a real quick decision to make after he got done getting his master's degree. And poking your head out of academia and looking around and saying, hey, what's going on in the world? What's going on with our political situation? And it went from one big swing to the other side with the introduction of artificial intelligence into all things, people taking these preliminary use cases and trying to realize them. I think it's smart to stay in school, kids. You get to learn how the workforce is going to shift and how the climate's going to shift, and take your time and also gain your education. So you come out stronger.
We're locking away for a couple of years and going to come out hopefully when the world is either in ruin and I can take care of it better, or it's better than it is now.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to the sciences.
I'd caught wind of somebody's nephew making a guitar out of their uncle's skeleton, and I'd kind of put that in front of him to say that, hey, when the world does end, I actually skip it. I don't require anybody to come find my skeleton wherever it may be. Or you just suddenly learn guitar, but that's kind of why we're talking.
I'm more of like a bass player, right? So I'd probably go for someone who's like really tall and long, just has like a stretched out spine, because I want someone longer, right? So I can hit those low register notes.
Yeah, you're not tall enough or a loner enough to be a bass player, by the way. I don't know if that...
I think I don't have the stretched out face, right? Because it's really about the nose. Like you can find a bass player who's like 4'10". He just has to have a really long face. Like it's got to be...
Yeah, but they have to have long arms too, because the bass needs to be by your kneecaps appropriately. Like, There's two places the bass could go, I'm told. One is above the dick, and the other is below the dick. But it's not over.
It can't go over time. Yeah. No,
it's
you're
the
right.
hallmark of a bass player. The other hallmark is...
Oh, that's so right.
And there's no lack of videos on the internet of guys trying to kiss girls and then pushing them away, like friend zoning them. Mm-hmm. And then the next clip's like some guy holding out a bass, like, congrats, you're a bass player. Bass players typically hang out in the basement and play the bass.
Yep.
Not to say there's been many, many, many bass luminaries, Jaco Pastorius, Victor Wooten.
Love you, bass players. It's definitely better than guitar because things are tuned in fifths, and that makes going up the strings a little bit easier in my mind from the standpoint of someone who's a, cello master. It's similar enough, at least it's not guitar, but there definitely is some improvements that bass players could make, which is true. They're nothing without an amplifier.
If you're going to stick with a stringed instrument, now that you live so close to the coast, you're going to need to
ukulele.
Change the strings a little more often because they get dead rather quick. We're well off topic. I guess my point with bringing up all this that I brought up was that if you watched Aidan grow up, which I kind of sort of have, you got to see that he identifies a goal and then doggedly pursues it. I think that's something that's unique from a lot of people on this planet. Everyone's like, oh, I want this to magically happen. And, you talk to friends that are like, hey, you should make that a movie. Like, I bring up this example all the time because it's like, hey, you should make that a movie. It's like, yeah, just saying make that a movie is saying make that a movie. But you have to learn how to break complex goals into smaller tasks in order to attain them. And one of the things that he's been good at, or I watched him start and then become great at, is juggling. But not only juggling, but juggling with a purpose in mind.
My name is Aidan Webster. Right now, I'm known as a 5-time Guinness World Record juggler, and have made it into the feature of this year's 2025 Guinness World Record book. Last summer, I broke the record for the longest duration juggling 4 flaming torches and the longest time juggling 5 knives. And I started going for these records after I wanted to better explain to people my purpose for juggling.
Yeah.
Because I do it purely for fun. But when I tell people, oh, one of my hobbies is juggling, the first thing they always ask me is, oh, are you a clown? Do you juggle balls? Like, I get all these really dumb remarks, and I want to put some respect behind it. Yeah. So I thought to myself, what impresses people? What's flashy? And how can I break a record?
Yeah.
The whole idea was to just break the longest time juggling 5 knives. Because if you go to Wikipedia, it was set to only be like 20 seconds or something I knew I could break with enough practice.
Yeah.
However, what I didn't know is when I started this journey about 4 years ago, that it was going to take me 2.5 years of emails back and forth with Guinness and me breaking 3 other world records to prove myself in order for that 5-knife record to even be something that I could possibly take on, because I had to get them to put it in their catalog.
Yeah.
So instead of the project being, I'm just going to break this record, it was, how do I argue over email where it takes them 2 to 3 months to get back to me the most effective way I can in order to eventually break this record. But I guess going back to your initial question, I grew up in Pennsylvania, left Pennsylvania, went to Florida for my undergrad for 4 years. Now I can't live anywhere that isn't above like 70 degrees on average yearly because I like the heat.
Yeah, I've been similarly spoiled, but I also have a wintertime gravity habit, in the form of skiing and snowboarding.
Okay.
Well, I need to be within striking distance of mountains. I live in Venice Beach, California now, and out here we have a Mammoth Mountain as well as Lake Tahoe. We can get to up to Mount Bachelor if we're enterprising, but there's lots of places we can go. Aidan bounced from Tampa back to Pennsylvania for the quickest of minutes, where hopefully it was humid and hot enough for him, and then right back down to Galveston, Texas, where he is now currently residing. The Guinness Book of World's Records.
Yeah.
Talk about the genesis of the idea, because you said you wanted to bring respect back into the hobby of juggling, but I got to tell you, man, you're tilling against windmills, because I can walk down to Venice Beach and go see 10 jugglers, and they're all stoned hippies, dude.
So that's the issue, right? People have this weird impression between different hobbies that, some people will find it interesting. Some people won't understand the kind of passion that I put behind it and the amount of time that I've spent building up these skills. Like, this is something that I've been doing since I was 6 or 7 years old. So I've gotten really freaking good at it. And if I tell people something like, I'm a national champion swimmer or something, they understand the level I'm at. They understand the dedication. They understand the discipline and the passion that I have behind that. You can't get the same thing with juggling because there's no way to quantify the skill level.
Yeah.
So I was trying to figure out, okay, what can I do so when I explain this to people, it's easier for them to understand the level I'm at and the passion that I take with it. And the first thing that went through my head was, I know there's some world records in juggling that I could be close to beating, especially if I spend a couple of months really cracking at it. And also in my head, I think to myself, if I've been juggling since I was 7 years old, what's another 4 years in order to break a world record? I could spend 4 years every day working on just this one skill and eventually break it, and that would be worth my time. I just do 10 minutes a day in my normal practice sessions. It wouldn't be too much different than what I'm normally doing, and I'd have a goal to work towards. It's always good to work towards a goal.
Yeah.
I kind of was looking at, what can I break? I noticed I was like, okay, there's this, in juggling, you've got 3 main props. You've got your juggling balls, which are just your soft, squishy ball. You've got your rings, which are like a round, it's really just a ring shape that are made of plastic. And those are terrible if you do them outside in the wind, but they look really cool visually, especially from the side, because there's kind of like these hoops about, maybe the diameter of your head that are swinging around.
Yeah.
And because they're thin, you can usually juggle a lot of them if you're really good. And then you've got clubs, which is sort of what jesters built in order to practice doing something like knives. And that's pretty much just a stick that's wider at one end that isn't the handle. So it's a little bit heavier on one end, so you don't try to catch that.
That's interesting. You say those clubs are like a stepping stone to juggling knives and more dangerous items like ferrets and live hand grenades.
Like a toilet bowl scrubber, anything where you're only going to be catching that one end. Anything that flips.
Not a new toilet bowl scrubber, but one that like you found in your college dorm.
Yeah, exactly. For these juggling clubs and stuff, they're much more difficult to juggle than it was for like a juggling ball. So I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, okay, what records exist? And I'm going through like Wikipedia, and I noticed for specific patterns, especially ones that I'm really good at because I've got really strong arms, I was like, there's a couple of patterns here that with high numbers, because my...
We're going to put a pin on that for a second.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that he has strong arms, because when we talked about Aidan and his goal setting, one of the other things that he pursued was gymnastics. And he similarly has pursued gymnastics since a young age and has gotten probably equally as good at that. I wouldn't say that you were interested in going to pursue Olympic contention, but I think at some point you might have been able to, right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just required a shift.
It would have required the same dedication, and I could have definitely done that if I'd wanted to, meaning with my just natural like talent for picking stuff up. I think the big thing is doing something that you enjoy, because all of the gymnasts that are the best, all the jugglers that are the best, they're people that enjoy what they're doing, and it's just like a hobby for them. Like the people that binge playing a video game and they get really good at that video game, it's the same thing for your Olympic athletes, except for the people that are going on their revenge strike or whatever to get at someone who like killed their father and they have to like come back to like avenge them or whatever.
Never seen that anywhere ever.
Except for like your every the like anti-hero in your animes, usually it's someone who
Yeah.
really enjoys what they're doing. So I definitely had the opportunity to do that, especially towards the end of my gymnastics career, where I was like getting really good with pommel horse and really racking up high scores where I could have been a national qualifier easily for the kinds of skills that I was doing. However, the issue is I think there's only like 16 schools in the US that have men's gymnastics. It's not super common, which is crazy because it's a badass sport, right?
Yeah.
You're doing backflips, you're doing all these crazy skills, you get freaking ripped. But for some reason, no one wants to do gymnastics. It's not popular. So I didn't have many options going to college to do the sport. So instead, I went for my education. You know, I was studying the ocean. That's what I was interested in. So I went to Eckerd College where I could study the ocean. But as you can imagine, they didn't have gymnastics. So I kind of just put a pin in that.
Yeah.
I do miss it. You know, I do kind of regret the fact that I could be much better. And it'd be really cool to see sort of the improvement of skill over the last 4 years if I was continuing to train, especially as you get older and you get smarter and you get stronger. Would have been awesome. But at the same time, I've replaced it with other things.
Ideally, there's a lot of people in this country that as they get older, they don't get smarter. They tend to want to rely on other people to do their thinking for them out of laziness. That's a whole different subject.
Yeah.
There was this movie before you were even thought of, much less born.
Oh, Jim Cotta. Jesus Christ.
Have you seen it? Is it something that like gymnastic friends get together and like, let's watch Jim Cotta?
His name, Jonathan Cabot. His title, World Gymnastics Champion. His assignment, a secret mission for the United States government. His only weapon, himself. And that's all he needs.
Don't trust anyone.
When I tell people that I juggle, one of the first things they ask is something related to a testicle joke revolving around balls.
Yeah, but consider your age group.
Yeah, okay, but even like adults. 1 out of 10 people when I mention gymnastics mentions Jim Cotta to me. And almost every time I go, yeah, I think the last person I asked about like what this thing was explained to me that it was some guy on like a pommel horse like attacking ninjas or something. And then they all tell me the exact same story of a guy on a pommel horse attacking ninjas.
That's true.
Yeah.
You mentioned that there should be more than 16 colleges that teach gymnastics because gymnastics is badass.
Yes.
I think this movie came out in the middle of the 80s. This movie was an attempt to capitalize on gymnastics being cool. Mary Lou Retton had just won all these awards in the Olympics, all the Olympics from gymnastics. All her stuff was all over plastered cereal boxes. So it's just gymnastics was in the zeitgeist at this moment in time. And so there was like movies about it. Something similar happened with like Kung Fu in the mid to late 70s, you know, with Bruce Lee. And then it became like a black cultural thing. And then it became like a middle-aged white dude thing. You'll see if you look back at materials or advertising stuff, they'll have like Kung Fu pants and shit for like dudes to wear out socially and stuff. So I guess what I'm saying is, unfortunately, gymnastics that wave didn't reach its apex. And maybe it will. Maybe this podcast alone, Aidan, will
blow up
bring renewed
men's
attention.
gymnastics.
Yeah, this podcast about juggling, peripherally about gymnastics.
Because women's gymnastics is popular. It's just men's gymnastics, which is less popular for whatever reason.
I need to de-segue us because this all came from a strong arm content, and then we were going back to juggling, and I interrupted you. You were talking about how it takes certain strength to juggle, and that's where you started being able to attain those goals of having the endurance to get at the awards.
Yeah. Again, like you get pretty much good at anything that you spend enough time practicing with. So I'm looking at the different records that I could break. And at some point I stumbled across, because, you know, at this point I was getting into upgrading from the clubs to the knives.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, if I Wikipedia knife juggling, and actually let me do it right now. If you were to Google.
How old were you, by the way, when you started juggling knives?
16 or 17?
Okay.
I was a little older.
So not enough that your mom was like completely freaking out, but just normally freaking out.
She freaked out more with the fire, which confused me because the fire is way less dangerous than chopping your hand off. You know, a little burn is nothing, especially if the flame just touches you real quick and bounces off you, versus like a burn will heal. You losing your hand won't heal.
Takes a little bit longer to chop your house down with a knife.
You know, I was expecting her to care more about my safety than the
Or to chop a national forest down versus burn it down.
That's a good point. So back to the story, right?
Yeah.
So I was doing some Googling, right? And if you Google knife juggling, I'm at the Wikipedia page right now.
Yeah.
I was scrolling down to the bottom. It says like world records. And it says the current world records for juggling both 5 and 6 knives are held by Tom Wall. And it says the record for juggling 5 knives is 103 throws and catches.
Yeah.
It's not a super long amount of time. Juggling 5 of anything is really difficult.
Yeah.
Juggling 5 spinning objects is really difficult. And then juggling 5 spinning objects that don't behave the same way every time you throw them because of the way they catch the air,
Yeah.
blade or flat side flying at you. okay, leading 103 throws and catches. At the time, I thought, I could do that if I just put a couple of years of practice into it. So I started training for it. And that's sort of the whole start of this story. It was like, what's a record I could break that would be impressive, that would allow me to show people, there's some respect in juggling, that I'm not just a clown, if you will.
This was in your in-between time, having a full schedule at college and also a job, right?
Yeah, I was a researcher. I was a scuba diver, or a dive master. I was working at a dive shop. I was doing all sorts of stuff.
This underachieving kid finally decided to get off his ass and go do something.
But to be honest, I didn't have gymnastics when I came to college.
Yeah.
So when I first showed up, I was lacking purpose, right?
Yeah.
So this was good for me to have something that wasn't just straight, like, professional.
Not mention what my purpose was in college.
Yeah. If that was my purpose, I'd still outperform you in it. I know that. But
oh boy. Yeah. You would also have a Trans Am on blocks. You'd be living in the suburbs of Tampa, and you'd have 5 kids from 2 different baby mamas. So yes, a different world, I guess. So thankfully you didn't pursue that pathway of industrious cad. Okay.
Back to the story. Off of the tangent. Yeah, so you get this guy, Tom Wall, who's a real good juggler.
Yeah.
Very respectable guy. And I noticed, I'm like, okay, 103 throws and catches. If I work hard enough, I can break that. I was like, okay, now how do I make this like a Guinness World Record, right? How do I get them to like notice it and put it in their catalog? I thought it was going to be like easy. I thought I'd just have to submit an application. You can submit like a $5 application for a new record.
Yeah.
I've actually got it up right now, like my first little emails and stuff to them. And the first thing that I sent them was in December of 2022.
Okay.
And I pretty much said, here's the record, here's the Wikipedia link, here's this juggler, like here's all the background and evidence. It's like this record is registered, people know it exists, this is the official thing. And they came back and they said, hello Aidan, thank you for submitting a record application. Could you provide more detail on what it is you're proposing so our record manager is going to establish whether or not this is something we can monitor as a record? If possible, send a YouTube video to a guy or someone performing the action. And I was like, you're juggling 5 knives, you're tracking either catches, like how many times you throw and catch the object, or if you've been doing it for a while, like a long time, you just track the time. So 5 minutes of you doing this thing, right?
Yeah.
And again, Guinness has done this a million times with a million different juggling records. So of course I come back and I pretty much explain that whole concept. I'm like, juggling patterns are tracked in either time or catches. And I said, here's an example from Guinness. This is the most juggling catches on a unicycle. Here's the time that they did it.
Yeah.
And then I said most consecutive overhead juggling catches. Here's the amount of catches they did. So I'm explaining to them kind of how this works in this email. Then I get no response. You know, of course, 2 to 3 months between each of these.
Yeah.
And they finally come back and say, cool. Yeah, we're going to make juggling 5 knives a record in the record book.
You got to remind them they can, in fact, do what they've been doing.
But they didn't. They took the longest time juggling 5 knives. They said, in the interest of keeping our record standardized, we're going to put it under the record of juggling 5 objects.
Wait, what?
So if you're to break the world record for juggling 5 objects, you could do it with juggling balls, scarves, balloons, or you could do it with frickin' knives.
I could juggle handkerchiefs for a decade, probably.
And that goes back to what I'm saying between balls and clubs.
Yeah.
Juggling clubs is way more difficult. The most clubs juggled is like 9, I think, but the most balls juggled is like 14.
So you had to advocate for this new thing.
So then we send another email, and then we get another kind of dumb reply back. And eventually, after a while, they made an entire new application for juggling 5 knives.
Okay.
But instead of setting, so they finally make it a record, but instead of setting the time at 104 throws and catches, or about like 20 seconds of doing this ridiculous feat, they set the time to break as an hour.
What?
On the world record for juggling 5 clubs, and juggling 5 clubs is easier than juggling knives. The world record at the time wasn't even above an hour.
Yeah.
So doing something easier wasn't above an hour, but they said, okay, we're going to make the base record to break at an hour in our catalog. At this point, I thought to myself,
stuck a finger in the air and made a
I need to be taken seriously.
uneducated guess.
That's pretty much what they were doing.
Yeah.
I then ended up, I was a little bit pissed. So I was like, all right, I need to get revenge on Guinness. I need to show them that they need to take me seriously and listen to what I say.
This may or may not make the final cut. Aidan's revenge on Guinness.
Me getting revenge on,
In your hero's journey, you went from doing something that you enjoy
getting pissed
to like the hero who out of spite and revenge becomes a Jedi Master now.
A little bit, yeah. But we come back, we come full circle. I've got a good relationship with Guinness now.
Nice. Your mentor didn't chop you up and you turned into a robot overlord?
No, but I definitely could have chopped them up with the knife record, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Okay. There we go.
I was So at this point, I'm like, okay, they need to take me seriously. I went through their catalog and I'm like, what are the 3 easiest records that I could break? Thinking that because they're really like stingy about stuff, if I try to break 3, maybe I'll break one of those. So I was like looking through their catalog and I was thinking, what's the cross section of skill that I have that no one else would have, or only a couple other people on the planet would have? Juggling and gymnastics. So I found the most backflips done while juggling, which means you throw a ball in the air, you do a backflip, and then you hope to God you know where the heck that ball is, and you catch it in time to continue juggling.
Yeah.
And I had to do that 8 times to break that record. So that was pretty difficult.
Wait, 8 times in a row?
8 times. You had a minute to do this, and if I did more than 8 backflips, I would break the record from the previous guy.
And you would also vomit out the entire contents of your stomach.
Or strain my abs, right? Because I'm not doing beautiful, great form gymnastics backflips. I'm doing the quickest, snappiest, arching my back, throwing my legs over my head backflip I can. Frantic, you're
Yeah.
in the video of
And
this.
keep in mind, only like 97% of our listening audience is able to do 8 backflips in 10 minutes, much less.
So that's the other thing. It's
More like no backflips in the course of their life unless they want to die.
Well, it ended up like being cardio, so it ended up being something that I had to train quite a bit. And for me to do a backflip again, like the whole ab strain, I just had to get my abs used to like snapping into that stretch position. So I had to just be like really well stretched out, and then really snappy and like have good cardio. So like I was doing more like running and like volleyball and stuff. Keep up with my cardio. But
While pursuing a degree, while also working full-time at a dive shop as a scuba diver.
I was working full time as a researcher then over the summer
okay.
in between doing the degree. So this was the summer where I had off, but I was also on the weekends going diving. Maybe it was a night dive. You know, I get back at 2 a.m., whatever.
In the hot Tampa sun, where the average Tampan is either going to some weird Christian fundamentalist church or making meth in their basement.
Yeah, I don't know if it's so much as meth, or there's a lot more like psychedelic, like Molly and stuff. You know, maybe that'd be a little bit more of their
Your college
thing. Like,
age.
There's alligators and stuff, so it's like, you know, very nature based. But
Yeah.
back to what I was saying.
Where would you go train?
This is the thing, right? There's things that I'm allowed to say and things that I probably shouldn't say, except I'm already graduated, so I can probably say the things I shouldn't be saying.
Okay.
And when I was doing, so I'm just going to stick with this story of the 3 records. It's more interesting when I did the knife record, because I was pretty much training in the woods on campus where no one could find me, so it wouldn't look like...
Or if somebody did, they just see a man and grinning like an idiot in the woods with 8 knives in his hand.
It's over the summer, which means it's really freaking hot in Tampa.
Yeah.
I would wake up pretty much at sunrise, start practicing, and then once it got really hot, after like an hour, hour and a half, I would then go to the lab, you know, maybe get breakfast, then go to the lab, do all of my lab work. And then once it was about sunset, I then go back. This time I was doing it at the beach where there was sand, just a little softer landing for like the backflips and stuff.
Yeah.
And I would practice again for another hour, hour and a half. And I pretty much did that every day and breaking the backflip record. But I was also trying to break these other 2, which was, it was like the most juggling catches with 1 arm with 2 balls while hanging from a bar.
Yeah.
I did a dead hang, and I had to do a dead hang for a minute with 1 arm, which already is just really difficult. And then I had to juggle 2 balls in the other hand. It was the most amount of catches I could do with that hand. So it was like the dumbest freaking record in the world. I knew because I just have good grip strength that I could easily break whatever the current record was. Like I think I shattered it by like over 100 catches.
It was most juggling catches in 1 minute with 1 hand while in the dead hang position, 2 balls.
Yeah, it's
completed. It's 162, and it was completed by Aidan Webster, USA, in St. Petersburg, Florida, USA, on the 14th of July in 2023. And that's on the Guinness Book of World Records website, by the way, ladies and gentlemen.
The last record was then the longest time juggling 3 flaming torches, which was less skill dependent and more dependent upon how long it would take for the torches to just burn out on their own, which is really weird. And this is where like I kind of noticed that Guinness didn't fully understand, I guess, how juggling worked, because you could juggle 3 flaming torches as a decent juggler for half an hour easily because they're lightweight. You're only doing 3 of them. However, in order to break the record, I only had to juggle them for past about 3.5 minutes because it was dependent upon whether the torches would burn through their fuel or not.
What kind of fuel did you use? Because I had a fire dancer on this program, and she was telling me about the different types of fuel. From season 1, episode 1, Dance into the Fire.
You can use things like lamp oil. I tend to use that because it has a slower burn. And when I'm learning, I don't want huge flames.
Yeah, what I was doing is I bought a couple of different fuels, mostly like different kinds of lamp oil or like lighter fluid and stuff.
Yeah.
Because some people like want a really big, bright flame that lasts for, I don't know, like a minute. I want to go for time.
Yeah.
I would light up each torch on a day where it wasn't windy. And I did this at a local beach, kind of like off in the corner with a friend who was like looking out for like the cops or whatever, just in case like we had to shut stuff down.
Nobody was interested in coming and rubbernecking, like, hey, there's some dude juggling fire on the beach. Let's form a crowd.
I will get to that once we get to the 4 torch record, because that's pretty much what happened. happened and cops showed up. And
Okay.
yeah, so I'm trying to figure out what fuels is going to last the longest, and just juggling 3 torches, we're timing it. And we ended up noticing, I don't even remember which one it was at this time, but it was like one specific brand of lamp oil lasted an extra like 30 seconds longer than the lighter fluids and the other like best lamp oils and stuff. I pretty much just went with that. And then in the record, I soaked the torches, the Kevlar on the torches for a while, which meant that when I was juggling, I was getting little bits of lamp oil that were like, you know, flaming hot flying at me and like into my eyes and stuff. So for the first 30 seconds of juggling these torches, I was having, you know, like my eyes slowly kind of burnt out.
Oh,
but it was
no.
worth it because I could then go an extra 10 seconds, and it was a little windy that day and that was going to mess me up. So, but yeah, I pretty much broke 3 Guinness World Records just so then I could come back and respond to this email after like a year and a half of emails back and forth with Guinness to say, can we do the 5-knife record now? And
Yeah.
can you bring it from an hour limit to what it actually should be, which is 104 throws and catches or maybe 20 seconds? And I came back with this email and said, hey, I'm currently the record holder for the longest duration doing this. I pretty much mentioned all of my records. I said, here's the footage of my attempts. Based upon my qualifications, I'm confident, you know, I said this very nicely, but I pretty much said I'm confident that doing over an hour with 5 knives is currently impossible by any juggler's standards, even the ones that are incredibly strong, because the knives are heavy too, so you wear out fast.
Yeah.
They finally came back and said, you know what? No, I'm still not going to do this. And I pretty much gave up at that point. And I said, you know, I'm going to just email them again and just be annoying. And I did that maybe 2 or 3 more times. And then after another like a year, they said, sure, we'll bring it down to 35 seconds. So we went from an hour to 35 freaking seconds. I just, at this point, I was so confused, but I pretty much called my friend who did all the photography and videography stuff for me for the other 3 records. I pretty much told him on the spot, I'm like, hey, give me a couple of months. We're going to break the world record for the longest time doing 5 knives. And then I was thinking to myself, instead of doing just the 3 torches like I did before, let's just throw in a 4th torch and do the same thing and, you know, just kill 2 birds with 1 stone while we're there, you know, get a little bit of a crowd, make it more interesting.
Oh, yeah. Insulated.
Yeah. But then I guess the final part of this email too is the day before I asked them, hey, I'm going to be wearing gloves and safety glasses while I break this record. And then they told me the day after I broke the record, sorry, but you can't use gloves or safety glasses for your record.
You have to use gloves, don't you?
Yeah.
So you had to go back and redo it?
No, I do not.
Okay.
Because they ended up 2 months later accepting it.
Yeah,
So
I was
I guess
gonna
they
say.
changed their standard last second, but it was crazy. Here's the email. It says,
They want you to purposefully put yourself in more danger than unnecessary? Or?
in the interest of keeping all records standardized, the use of gloves as safety glasses is not allowed for this record attempt. Thank you.
Oh, boy.
And they
They've
know
never-
what date I'm breaking these things because of all the paperwork you have to do around them. So they knew that I was going to break it on this date.
Yeah.
And the fact that they sent the email a day after was like, you knew I just broke it yesterday, so why are you emailing me a day after?
Guinness Book of World Records, then, which I believe evolved from just normal bar trivia and has such notable luminaries as the world's most obese twins, is also kind of a pain in the ass when it comes to breaking real records that require actual skill.
Yes, unless you have a big promotional team that covers all that stuff for you and you're a big business and you're going to be getting them more media attention.
Okay.
But we get to the point where I've now broken 3 Guinness World Records just so they'll take me seriously enough for me to make my 5-knife world record.
5
reality.
knives.
Before they wanted
Holy
5
fuck.
knives, yeah. According to Wikipedia and according to all the record-setting sites, the time to beat for that was 104 catches or maybe about 20 seconds of actually juggling 5 knives.
Okay.
And Guinness first said, oh, we're going to make this the same as juggling any 5 objects like bouncy balls or scarves. Then they said, we'll make it its own category, but we'll set the time to break at an hour. Now they finally set the time to break at 35 seconds. So it's humanly possible, but now we have to train, and now we have to do all of the hard work of preparing the 6 people minimum you need for every record to break, 2 of which you can't be related to or know or be friends with. And then we also have to go and find a way to train juggling 5 knives as I'm living on a college campus as an undergraduate researcher over the hot summers in St. Petersburg, Florida.
The average temperature there is like 99 degrees, and the average humidity there is like 99%.
100%.
It's
Yeah, the
ridiculously
humidity's
hot. People scurry from shadow to shadow during the middle of the day, if they go out at all.
You're not joking. That's what happens. And that's kind of what I would do in the morning. I'd wake up, scurry between shadows. We had a section of our campus called the palm hammocks.
Okay.
That was pretty much just nature.
Yeah.
And I could go into the palm hammocks and be surrounded by all these palm trees.
And palmetto bugs.
Blend in enough, and palmetto bugs.
Ugh.
And I could blend in enough that no one would be able to see me. And since it was the summer, the probability of me running into a bunch of college stoners into the back of the palm hammocks was pretty low, especially early in the morning, right? You know, sun's rising up at like 6 a.m.
Well, or the people sleeping off last night's shroom trip never quite made it home.
That too. But again, over the summer, there was less of those kinds of people. So
I
the
see.
probability of that was a little less.
I love that you snuck off
Yeah.
into the woods to go juggle knives. It's just
Yeah, and it was something that I told Tampa Bay Times about, and I told them like, "Hey, don't publish that because I'm still at the school and I don't want them to know that I was doing this on campus in case I get in trouble." And then they published in their paper, "Yeah, he would go off into the woods on campus, so he was in secret and practice juggling knives." And I was like, "That's the one thing I told you not to publish."
just don't go for like an assault weapon cleaning record.
But, yeah, so I'd show up every day. I had my spot where the ground was nice and flat and it was a little sandy. And if I missed a knife, instead of it bouncing off the ground, it would just stab into it really aggressively, which would look super cool.
Okay.
So I had like a nice spot to practice, enough shade where I was getting some sunlight, but the sun wasn't blinding me in the eyes. Because the thing with the knives, you know, they're metal, right? They're actually going to shine and reflect light off right into your eyeballs, especially when I went to do the record
For our listening audience, there will be pictures and video available on our web pages and social media.
Good photos and videos. That's the big thing here, because sort of around the same time this was happening, you know, I'm practicing for this 5-knife record. And because knives and fire, they both operate the same with this flipping motion, I didn't really practice for the 4-torch record I was going to break at the same time, because me practicing for 5 knives is almost the same as like if you're learning a song on guitar, you increase the tempo faster than you're going to actually play it at. Like it's more difficult for me to do 5 knives than 4 torches. So I'm practicing with 5 knives. My 4 torches is improving too.
Okay.
And at the time, I got an email from Human Relations at our school. They pretty much tagged me and my friend who's a photographer with the school and said that Guinness had come calling and wanted to use one of the photos that my friend took of me during the records for their 2025 book. And this was crazy because getting in the actual book, like, you know, I think there was 20,000 records broken in the year 2024 to go into the 2025 book. I think there's only 2,000 actually then put in the book. So the reason why I'm even in the book is because my friend is a really good photographer and got really good photos of me doing that. And if you want to see my friend, he's a Pen Alan Conjo or Seek Adventure Media on Instagram. And again, an incredible professional photographer. Because he got really good photos of me with like the flames and good lighting and stuff, I think that's really the reason why I'm in the book, just because he got a photo that looked really impressive. At this point in the summer, where every day, you know, I've got something to wake up for, so I'm excited. I go to bed kind of smiling. I wake up like, hee, here we go. Put my knives in my school bag where no one can see them. And since the knives are over a foot long each,
they're
so I've got
pretty
like
big.
the butt of them sticking out of my school bag.
Yeah,
and they're freaking heavy. So I've got these custom-made steel blades that should be lighter than like every other juggling knife on the market to make 5 easier. But then I'm like going to the palm hammocks, and I'm noticing that if the knife is flying at me blade side, I can't really see one end of it. Like the handle is thick, so I can see the handle.
Yeah.
But if the knife's coming at me blade side, especially quickly, and it being a little reflective, it kind of blends in with like the trees, and it's reflecting the green light or whatever off the trees. It's bouncing off the trees into my eyes. They would go from being invisible to then visible again. And if I threw them flat side on accident, then they would slow down midair because there's more air resistance.
Yeah.
So for me to do 3 is pretty easy because I have enough time to kind of figure out how they're flipping. And I'm not throwing them as high. But with 5, I'm throwing them really high. And they're flipping fast enough that they're getting affected more by this like difference in aerodynamics depending upon how I throw them or how they're being spun. And then you have the issue of if you hold 3 knives in one hand, how the heck do you get all 3 of those up out of that one hand accurately and in time to then catch the other 2 that were thrown by your left hand?
Yeah.
And then continue doing that. I thought to myself, I can juggle 5 clubs for quite a while. Doing the knives should be the same.
Yeah.
They were much different. Both the light flickering off into my eyes, not to mention the way that they would flip. It was a bigger challenge than I was expecting. And it took me about 2 months before I even broke the record in practice, which at the time for Guinness, they were saying was 35 seconds.
Okay. Well, how did you overcome the flashy knife tip thing? Did you mute them? Did you put tape on them so you could blunt them? Or was it just something that you just needed to keep practicing and get a touch for?
Guinness is real picky with like the props you use. Like I have to specify the length, any modifications, like everything about this knife I had to tell Guinness about. You know, they didn't want me to use safety glasses and gloves for whatever reason. So like there's all these little things they're really specific about, and you have to send them links if it's a product you got digitally. I didn't modify the knife just out of worry for that, or worry that I'd send them an email and they won't get back to me for 2 months. So I would just use polarized sunglasses, which would help with some of the glare off the knife. And then pretty much just trusting, I wouldn't say my instinct, but my muscle memory, because I'm doing a double flip with every throw, and I know the feel of a double flip. So I'd have to trust myself and say, even though I don't see the knife, I see kind of generally where this blurry image is. And I know because how I'm throwing it and because how consistent my throws are, that if I put my hand out, I'm going to be touching the wood handle and not the blade.
Hopefully.
And this is kind of terrifying because you're almost blind, right? You're not looking at your hands, you're looking up at the cascade. And all I'm seeing from my perspective is the apex, where all 5 of these objects have reached 0 velocity, right? Their acceleration is going from a positive to, their velocity is going from positive to negative vector. So it's like they've kind of stopped for that split second at the top of the apex.
Yeah.
And now I'm watching them all kind of just sort of move around. And then my brain's doing the calculus to figure out where the heck my hand should go in order to catch these. And then I'm relying on my muscle memory that I threw them correctly to then catch the handle. So when you see those like movies or those animes where like the ninja are like blindfolded and they're still like, attacking or whatever, it felt a little bit like that, where a lot of it was instinct and it was terrifying.
Okay. Hold up your hands real quick. I
got you.
Sorry.
That's the fun thing. The knives, the actual logo on the knives too is a guy with a finger missing.
Well, that's really encouraging.
Yeah, it's very encouraging. It's from a company called 3 Finger Juggling who made these knives. So
there's a horrible cell phone in there somewhere.
Yeah.
If later on the founder actually loses a finger from juggling. The day of, so you get to the point where you've practiced, you're ready, you've got the 6 people, you've alerted the press, and did you alert anybody from the college at this point? Because I know you made the college newspaper, and so this was obviously after they were like...
I made the college newspaper when I broke the 3 records that we'll call those the squishy records, right? They were just kind of cushy, just juggling 3 flaming torches. I wasn't doing 5 knives, 4 torches. I was doing some backflips while juggling.
Yeah.
So I broke those records to then have the status to then kind of argue with Guinness better, have some more leverage. And when I did those records, my friend was like, hey, we want to make this a big thing so then Guinness can take me seriously. Let's I got some connections in the news. Let's message some local news stations and let's try to get some people here. And a guy who does public outreach for the school can come and do a news story and stuff. So I ended up getting in a couple of like small newspapers, and then the school wrote an article. That was before the 5 knives. For the 5 knives, I kept it pretty hidden from the school, and it was more of a private thing where we went to a local public beach and we pretty much just set stuff on fire. We're throwing knives around. And this is where things got fun because at this point, we didn't really have any news. I was just sort of in my element. I could focus on these records that were much more difficult than the years before. But it also meant I had to deal with the fact that like, as I was juggling the 4 flaming torches for the record, we had a police car just stop and just watch.
Yeah.
And in terms of distractions, that's the last thing that I wanted, for a cop to just kind of sit there for about 2 minutes and then just continue driving. Like, I guess he sort of saw that I was in control and we had like fire extinguishers and stuff. It's not like we called ahead to try to get permission to do this at this beach. We just assumed that we could just get away with it.
It was a Florida cop, so he was probably just like, can I shoot this guy? Am I allowed to shoot him? So then he called on the radio. He's like, I got a guy here. He's doing something different. Can I shoot him?
Florida would be more like, I've got 5 alligators in the back. Can I release them on this kid? Would that be a proper way to restrain him? Texas would be just like, oh, I've got this new gun that I want to use.
Or some guy just put a prom dress on his feral hog.
Yeah, that'd be more Florida. Yeah.
The gun-toting member of the group would end up shooting themselves before they even removed the gun from their holster, as evidenced in all those failed John Wick videos. Anyway, we digress. The story of my friends is community-driven, community-supported. What helps us? Listen, like, follow, forward. Sharing this with someone in your life who loves podcasts helps us a lot. Do you have a story you'd like to tell on our show? Hit me up, joe@tsomf.com.
So breaking the record, now I'm actually like, I've got my 5 blades. It's a little bit windy and the lighting's not great. And I'm on the beach. Like we try to find a spot where it's not super windy. I've got lots of support. So I've got lots of like friends that are pretty much there to like watch with their eyes, get extra photos or videos from different angles. Because again, Guinness is picky. And then just a couple of friends that came out just to support for the fun of it. So like, I'm trying to keep them happy and I brought them Gatorades and stuff.
Aww.
But I'm also telling them like, hey, I could be here for 2 hours trying to break this record. Because with every time I practice, my arms get more and more tired, which means then I have to spend more time resting in between.
All shucks, I have to spend 2 hours on the beach.
A lot of people left early because it wasn't like there was like tons of waves. It wasn't like super pretty that day or whatever. The year before, I felt kind of cocky because I told the audience the same thing. I said, hey, you guys may be here for half an hour before I break this backflip record. My abs are going to need time to reset in between attempts because when I do these backflips, I'm really straining and stretching my abs out. And then I broke every record first try. So I felt really cocky because I was giving them these big warnings of like, we're probably going to be here for an hour or two. Thank you for sticking second round. I apologize, but thanks for doing this for me. And then I did it pretty much first try and was like, cool, now I feel like I said all of that and then just, showed off. But for this record, it took me a couple of attempts. For doing the knives, I was pretty much locked in, and I sort of know how long 35 seconds feels like at this point. And I passed by the 35-second point in my head, but I didn't hear anything from the crowd. So I'm wondering to myself, have I actually broken the record? Has time slowed down? But I know how good I am at this. I'm like, I've definitely passed the 35-second mark. And now that I've spent another 10 seconds trying to understand this, 100% I've passed the 35-second mark. This is the new world record.
Ta-da! It worked.
Everyone's silent. And then I didn't notice until after they were all silent because I had 5 freaking knives flying past my face. Some of my friends after that actually care about my safety tell me for days or weeks after, I was really freaked out. You had these big blades flying past your face. I was scared that you were going to chop your face off.
Yeah.
And I didn't think about that in the moment. So I ended up breaking the record and doing just under a minute with the 5 blades, which is probably the best time I could have gotten with the little bit of wind and stuff we had, because it doesn't make a difference, especially with the more objects you have and the longer things are flipping, the longer you go for. It was quite a ridiculous experience in terms of the aftermath.
Do they have a requirement that you end it gracefully, or can you just walk away and let all the knives drop? You have to catch them and this is the end, or...
Yeah, that's a good question. For some of the records, yes. But for this one, I could just mess up.
Okay.
And that's pretty much what happened. At some point, when you've got 5 long objects, 5 knives freaking spinning around, the probability of them smacking into each other is really high. In fact, the actual handles of these knives have tons of scars on them where I've cut the handles from the actual blade, which shows that when they're spinning fast, they're not super sharp. But when they spin fast and smack into even a hard piece of wood like this, they still cause damage. So you're spinning these knives, you're throwing them high, you're throwing them fast and hard. I pretty much, after 50 seconds in or so, had one knife just slightly touch another knife, which then slightly touched another knife, and then the entire cascade fell apart. So that's what caused me to fail in the end. It wasn't my arms were getting tired, or maybe they were getting tired and my accuracy was slowing down a little bit, but it was the fact that one throw was just a little bit less accurate. Maybe the wind hit it a little differently, and the whole thing fell apart.
Let's take a brief pause here, because since this is known as part talk show, part game show, we still have to give you the quiz. Well, I'm going to ask you a few questions.
Wonderful.
This is basically, before we get to the point where AI takes over the known universe, we got to make sure we're still smarter than it. I was working on a project with Cirque du Soleil using AI technology from Amazon Web Services, AWS, to do skills classification. So Cirque du Soleil gets a number of audition tapes from people all over the world, and they have different talents and they have different capabilities within that talent. So they were looking for a way to auto-magically review all these videos and have them determine, one, what is the person doing? They're juggling. Are they good at juggling? Well, what are they juggling? They're juggling balls. How many balls are they juggling? How long can they juggle it for? That type of thing. So it's interesting to see, as all things AI gets invaded into our everyday workflows, and this type of automation is something that's interesting. Hey, what's this person juggling? Knives. They're the Guinness fucking World Record holder. The Guinness Book of World Records. They hold the record. And the AI would just blow up. We didn't build that into it, but who knows? Could have happened.
If it just mentions my name, it instantly explodes and the system crashes and says, too advanced for the software.
Too advanced. So I ask AI to generate me a few questions.
Of course.
First question is,
Okay.
for juggling, what is the difference between a cascade and a shower pattern?
Oh, that's an easy one. Cascade is where objects are crossing and you're doing an odd number of objects. And a shower is where you're doing an even amount of objects and you're juggling half of whatever you're juggling. So if you're doing 8 balls, you're doing 4 in each hand. And usually they're rotating outwards like this.
Okay, I'll give you another easy question.
Okay.
Distinguish between planktonic and benthic foraminifera.
Oh my God. Planktic are they're floating around in the water column on the surface. They're planktic. Benthic means relating to the seafloor. So benthic forams live in the seafloor and they're much more abundant. There's about I think 60, 70 species or something of planktic foraminifera in the Gulf of Mexico. But in terms of benthic, there's hundreds. So in terms of species, much more diversity in benthic.
He completely nailed that one, and that was completely out of left field. All right.
It's a really easy one.
What is a flash in juggling terms?
Oh, yeah. So a flash is really important in terms of practicing. If I were to teach you how to juggle, let's say you can do 3 balls. If I were to teach you 4, we'd probably start with a flash, if not just drills beforehand. A flash is when you do the same amount of catches as you do throws. So for me, practicing something like 9 balls, I will throw 9 balls in the air and then I'll catch all 9. And it's sort of that first like, hey, I've completed this juggling pattern. For it to qualify as you actually juggling that amount of objects, you have to do twice the amount of throws and catches as you do the amount of objects. So the current world record right now for a flash is 14 balls.
Okay.
But the current world record for actually doing consistent juggling throws is 11.
It's
I think,
11
maybe 12.
ball is the record, and I have video of you juggling 9 balls, not flashing, but actually juggling 9 balls.
Yes.
And that's when I first thought, like, hey, this seems ridiculously hard, what he's doing right now.
And it's exponential. For every ball that you add,
You kind of see the matrix.
so yeah, you pretty much do see the matrix. Your mind is in a completely altered state. Like my peripheral vision after doing training for something like 7 or 9 balls is really wide to the point where like I can make eye contact with you while looking at your forehead, and I can see your eyes like clearly. I can read.
Well, I got a very big forehead, so that's not
without
hard with
looking
me.
like it would be more difficult if your forehead was big, right?
Okay.
So I can look at my webcam and I can read text a couple inches down.
Okay.
It's super weird. It's like your ability to see things outside of your normal vision enhances, plus your reaction time is really freaking quick.
Yeah.
And it's almost as if you're on like your own kind of sugar high that you've created yourself because your mind is locked in on keeping track of 9 freaking objects flying through the air. But it is ridiculous, and every object that you add, it gets exponentially more difficult. Like it's taken me 6 years to do
What
7.
you're saying is juggling, while not quite as cool as doing actual drugs, is a lot cheaper.
If you want caffeine, which is a completely legal drug, you can get a higher, I think when people say, okay, if you ingest caffeine, you have improved focus, you've got a little energy boost or a brain boost. I can do the same thing if I get into my juggling zone, if I'm doing a lot of objects and practicing for 5 minutes.
You heard that, kids. There are mental benefits associated with practical juggling. Improved focus, coordination.
Look at the studies.
Stress relief, improving intelligence, peripheral vision, getting girls.
Guinness World Records.
Guinness World Records.
Popularity on school campuses. Yeah.
Name one famous geological feature made largely of fossilized foraminifera.
Great Pyramids.
No, I don't think so.
I mean, there's fossilized foraminifera in the Great Pyramids.
I'm sure,
so
but
that's what I'm going to go for.
The answer I was looking for was the White Cliffs of Dover.
Of Dover. Yeah, okay. Well, that's an easy, like, that's not as interesting as, like, when people hear that there's foraminifera in the Great Pyramids, they're like, whoa, that's pretty crazy.
All right, smart guy.
I could say Florida. Are we done with the game show here, or are you going to ask some difficult questions?
One more question.
Yeah.
Why are foraminifera considered important index fossils?
Because different species show up at different geological time periods, and different events within differences in climate will have different amounts of species. So you can look at different species and tell things like, I don't know, how anoxic the water was at the time, and then you can go back in history and use that to relate to like rainfall or weather patterns. So a lot of the climate studies that we have, for example, a lot of the information we have about climate change is due to benthic foraminifera fossils, because we can go back really far in the time scale, and there's also very, very high diversity of different species. There's over, I think, 10,000 living species, maybe 20,000 extinct species that all can tell you different things about the world around them. So great proxies for environmental health as well as for understanding past climate.
I love that. And I love that they actually still teach that in Florida, where if
they don't,
you
teach it to yourself.
Don't want to educate yourself on something, you can just call it a conspiracy. It's a conspiracy. I don't know what this means, so it's a conspiracy.
Yeah, I think academia is still doing pretty good, though.
Yeah.
And definitely St. Petersburg, Tampa, they're also doing great with all that stuff. And they have to, because they're getting hit by hurricanes much more frequently. And I think they can kind of see that, especially after last year, where we got hit by 3 big ones pretty much right after one another. And the fact that Tampa is hitting breaking temperature records, plus the Gulf is getting ridiculously hot and their coral reefs are dying off.
Yeah.
So Florida definitely has a good understanding of what's going on, more than I think people might think based upon politics.
Yeah, I'm just being snooty.
Oh, I know.
Spent much time in Florida, a lot of time under the water there in the Florida Keys. I love it. I would hate for anything to happen to it. Like the continuation of the coral bleaching and stuff that's happening down there. So anything we can do to preserve those ecosystems, we should absolutely try. Aidan, we started this conversation talking about your ability to identify something that interests you and to set it as a goal and then to break that goal into the manageable pieces and then doggedly pursue that until you attain those goals. And I'm sure there's been many things that you've got fleeting interest in and that you've looked at for a little bit and that you've dropped. But this one you pursued and you faced some resistance. It was an uphill slog, particularly with Guinness and getting them to pay attention to this record that you wanted to break and then having them move the goalposts. But you did it and you generated some local press while doing it. It was bound to catch the ears and eyes of Guinness again once they realized they had an interesting poster man for this new thing. What was the aftermath? You got everybody together, you broke the record, you put it in front of Guinness. What happened next?
You wait a couple of months and see if you broke it or not, or see if one of the pieces of paperwork needs to have an address updated. And once they've come back and verified everything, you don't get a monetary award. You can pay $100 if you want to get one of these. I've got one right here. I've actually got all 5 of these fancy frames, which I've yet to hang up yet. And once you pay your $100 and they ship you your fancy frame, you pretty much just forget that you have the records. Unless you're me, where then you have Guinness kind of come back to you and say, hey, congratulations on being in the book this year. Can we use you for some promotion?
Yeah.
We want to get some local news stations in the area to interview you and cover you so that when this book comes out, we have a little bit more publicity surrounding that. So I ended up getting featured in a Tampa Bay Times article, which was bigger news station than the other local newspapers that covered me. And I got interviewed by a Pulitzer Prize winning reporter, which was a shock to me that I was going to be kind of in that situation.
Yeah.
And it was a 3-hour long interview, just us sitting at the beach chatting or taking notes. And then an article that started with, his father gave him the balls. We ended up having this article that I read back afterwards and was like, whoa, this is different. I wasn't expecting this kind of article. You can read it. You can find it online. It's really interesting kind of how they wrote it and the perspective they have. When one news station...
Lane DeGregory?
Yeah, Lane DeGregory. Very, very nice woman. But when she interviewed me, then all the other news stations want to interview you too. So there was someone on campus whose wife worked at Fox News. And he was like I think, head coach of the women's soccer team. So instead of just emailing me and saying, hey, can my wife interview you? Or can someone from Fox come interview you? We want to do a similar story. Especially after reading like his father gave him the balls and kind of being embarrassed by this article. I didn't want to do any more interviews because I read this article and was like, oh, this is bad. I hope people don't know that this article exists. And then, I go into class and let me break down the story here. We've got the head of the women's soccer team send me an email and says, hey, do you want to do another interview? And I pretty much didn't want to, but I'm like, I'm going to wait and like just think about it. What I didn't know is then he shared the article that starts with his father gave him the balls that I wasn't a super big fan of. He shared that with the women's soccer team and told the women's soccer team, if you see this man around on this very small campus, try to get a hold of him for me.
Okay.
So I was telling one of my roommates, I'm going to only tell you because I'm close to you. This is the article that was written. Wasn't a huge fan of it. I don't want people to know that this article was posted, so I'm not making a social media post. Don't tell anyone about it. Let's just let it kind of blow over. We start walking to class, and immediately, within 30 seconds, I've got a random girl who calls out, excuse me, are you Aidan Webster? my soccer coach told me that they're in a Tampa Bay Times article and to try to get a hold. And I was so embarrassed. I just slowly started to lay down on the floor. And is this just outside? I'm just like laying in the grass, like, and I just kind of get up and I'm like, okay, I'll respond to his email. Thank you. And then I start walking to class. Then another girl just out of the blue, hey, you're Aidan Webster. I'm like, oh, because I didn't want anyone reading this article, right? I then show up to my computer science class and I sit down and the professor walks in and he just smiles at me and says, I wasn't surprised. And I'm like, what? I wasn't surprised that you'd be the one to break 3 Guinness World Records. And I looked at this guy and I'm like, oh. So you read the article too? And he's like, yeah, it was a great article. And I'm like, it starts with his father gave him the balls. They said a bunch of stuff about me that seemed a little bit like...
That's a great first line. Why don't you like that?
Made me sound really cocky, if you will.
No.
And he was very positive about it.
It's funny.
I was so embarrassed. But yeah, at some point
It's cute.
I said, okay, fine, Fox News, let's do this thing.
What I like is that...
And then Fox did it.
If you look at all the articles about this, like each one lists a different city. He's in St. Pete. He's in Tampa. He's Orlando. You're like,
in Orlando.
No.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? I kind of learned working with the media that some groups do a really good, accurate job, and sometimes they're just really rushed.
And now
they'll misquote you a little bit, or
hear me out.
Yeah,
they try to use words that keep people interested, so they potentially consume more and come back. And Like, listen, and share, Aidan.
Of course.
Subscribe. You know the game.
Of course.
What's next? What is next for you on this journey of yours?
Oh, yeah. I've kind of stopped at the Guinness World Records because it's sort of annoying to spend months emailing someone and then to get 6 people minimum in order to just do a record that I could just break on my own. And, you know, I've already got 5. I think that's enough for me. I don't really need to prove anything. For me, again, it's a hobby.
Yeah.
I enjoy doing it for my own peace of mind. And I originally only wanted to break just that one record. And I ended up breaking another 4 just in the road to breaking that 5th one. So I think the plan for me now is to, you know, continue with it, but to really use it what it is supposed to be, which is just kind of a hobby that I enjoy and something that's fun. And being a couple blocks from the beach now, I can just sort of walk up when I'm doing lots of heavy lab work or working on other projects, and I need to reset my head, and I can kind of get into that quicker, you know, caffeinated brain, if you will, just by juggling, and allows me to have some peace of mind, because when you're juggling, especially at this level, you can't focus on anything else, and it's a good way to get out of any other headspace you don't want to be in.
Okay, well, let me know if you can actually shake that itch to get more and more records from Guinness, Aidan, and keep me posted. I have this really cool slow-mo video of Aidan juggling 9 balls on Long Beach Island off the coast of New Jersey. So that will be on our social medias. And given that the record is 11 balls, you get to see someone very close to what's possible. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank Aidan Webster for stopping by the show, The Story of My Friends. And if you have a question for Aidan, feel free to get in touch with us on our social medias, joe@tsomf.com or joe@thestoryofmyfriends.com if you like writing shit out, or go to our Instagram or our Facebook or our TalkTank.
Yes.
Anyway, Aidan, thank you very much. It is awesome to talk to you and have you talk through this.
All right. Thank you, Joe, for having me. And this has been quite a fun interview. So thanks.
Give me a goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
See ya.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's our show for now. The Story of My Friends, Juggle Me This, is a production of JF3 Co. LLC, produced by yours truly, Joe Friend. We'd like to thank Aidan Webster for letting us know that
His father gave him the balls.
special thanks for our assistant producer, Erica Loshin, and a shout out to all the creators of the clips and whiz-boings used throughout this episode. Full acknowledgments, attribution, credits, and thanks can be found on our website at thestoryofmyfriends.com. Questions, comments, thoughts, concerns, ideas? Send us an email at listener@thestoryofmyfriends.com.